Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to do a brief introduction to Dr. Jennifer Surtees, thanking her for taking the time out of her day. I just want to do a brief bio of her background regarding NSF. Dr. Jennifer Surtees is a professor of biochemistry and the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Education and STEM Outreach at the Jacobs School. Her research focuses on the general problem of maintaining genome stability, which refers to an organism's or cell's ability to accurately transmit genetic material to a new generation. She and her team study how mutations threaten that stability, leading to cancer and neurodegenerative diseases. She also co-founded and co-directed UB's Genome, Environment, and Microbiome, also known as GEM, Community of Excellence, to advance understanding of the genome and microbiome and their interactions with the environment through research, education, community programs, and art. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she led a team to establish a genomic sequencing of the COVID virus from clinical and wastewater samples in Western New York, aiding the region's response, identifying new variants, and helping the community understand how the virus evolved. This work set the stage for Dr. Surtees' first NSF grant, awarded through their initial phase of the Predictive Intelligence for Pandemic Prevention Initiative to support the development of an early warning system for future pandemics, and also work to rebuild community support around public health matters. In 2023, she received her second NSF award from the Division of Molecular and Cellular Biosciences. This project is aimed at characterizing the molecular mechanisms underlying both mismatch repair and the trinucleotide repeat expansions. We're really pleased to have her with us today. Thank you. So this is going to be a Q&A format. So we encourage our audience to also put in the chat questions that they have, but I have a few to start us off, and then we can kind of go from there. Does that work for you, Dr. Surtees?
That sounds great. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right, great. So my first question is, why did you decide to apply to NSF in the first place? I mean, we heard a little bit about it in your bio, but how about you explain to us why you decided?
Sure. Yes, I actually applied to the NSF when I first started here at UB, and I was not funded at that point, but I did have the opportunity to sit on a number of ad hoc review panels, both as a panel member and as an ad hoc member. And so I got to be really familiar with the process, the review process at NSF, which is different than other places. Because I work on sort of basic fundamental mechanisms, understanding how these DNA repair pathways work, this is basic biology that the NSF is really interested in funding. And so my work on the mismatch repair pathway fits really nicely into that. The other grant that I have, which is the pandemic prevention grant, was actually a special call that the NSF put out during the pandemic to try to promote convergent research. And so this is like one of the priorities of NSF is to promote convergent research, which is to bring different disciplines together to tackle really big problems. So this is different than the sort of investigator-driven proposal kind of process that my other grant is. And it's really some more specific goals in terms of pandemic prevention, but also in team building and promoting conversation across the disciplines. So that kind of conversations across the disciplines to me is really appealing and interesting. And so that was a really attractive thing for me in applying for that grant.
Great, thank you. Let's see, I guess I'll ask another question. And then hopefully we'll get some in the chat. What would you say are the key differences from NSF in terms of proposal development?
So
I mean NIH, did I say NSF? The
and
differences
between
between
NSF and NIH, yeah. That's what I heard. Uh, the big difference between NSF and NIH is that NSF does not fund anything that is medically oriented. So my DNA mismatch repair stuff has been funded by the NIH. And when I send that into the NIH, I talk about cancer, I talk about diseases, I talk about how understanding these basic fundamental mechanisms is really important for improving human health in the long term. When I send a grant to the NSF, that kind of language is completely inappropriate. So you have to really be thinking about what are the fundamental questions that it's okay to just ask how things work when you're applying to NSF. You don't actually have to have a human application, that biomedical application. So that is one like major difference there. And then the other difference is the broader impact. So some of you may be familiar with the sort of the two review sort of areas. So first is intellectual merit. And so this is really, is the research exciting? Is it interesting? Is the approach reasonable? Kind of along the lines of what you would expect and what you think about for other mechanisms, including NIH. Are the hypotheses strong? Is it well supported by the literature? That kind of thing. And then the other component or review criterion is broader impacts. And so this takes a little bit of time to think about what exactly that means. And actually, broader impacts covers a wide range of things. People often think it's really just about like engagement, but it's not necessarily, or like K to 12 engagement. That's the common thing that people put in. Back when I first started, 17 years ago, just putting in that you were going to train graduate students was sufficient for broader impacts. But I think we think much more broadly, if you will, about broader impacts now. So clearly training and developing a STEM workforce is really a key focus, and broadening participation. So that falls into the broader impacts. But also, how does the research impact society? Does it improve or contribute to public health policy? Does it improve or contribute to industrial applications or agricultural applications are going to benefit society more broadly? So broader impact is a really critical component of NSF grants. It is taken extremely seriously, and it has to be part of one of your priorities when developing your proposal. Um, and it, but I guess what I want to emphasize is that it doesn't just have to, or it doesn't have to be developing a whole new K to 12 STEM outreach program or a whole new training program. It can be a variety of things, and it can be a combination of things that help broaden participation and increase societal impact.
And yeah, so I guess to add to that, it's just really understanding that NSF is asking this intentionally. It's not something to just check off a box. It's something that really needs to be thought through when developing your proposal. And how
Yeah,
we
and
had
I mean,
talked
this
about.
is actually one of the core, sorry. This is actually
It's
one
okay.
of the core missions of NSF. So like since the early 80s, Congress has
Right.
dictated that the NSF actually broaden participation. And that can mean a lot of different things. And you can do it in a lot of different ways. But that is a core mission of the National Science Foundation.
And when we talked about how that may change under the new administration. Have you heard any more? Because I know you were going to be having I don't know if you were going to be part of a review, I
Yeah.
believe, or yeah.
Yeah, so I'm actually in the middle of a review panel right now. I took
Mhm.
a little bit of time out to do this. But so the guidance that we were given on, and that's actually, I wanted to do that review panel before having this conversation because I wanted to see how this was being handled. And so the guidance that the reviewers were given from the program directors at NSF was essentially, these are our review criteria. They remain intellectual merit and broader impact. And we're going to review them as we would have always reviewed them. But that, as always, the panel is advisory, and therefore we will review things as we always have. But the program directors will take that advice to ensure in such a way that it complies with executive orders. So I think broadening participation, I think, and emphasizing that remains a key element. I think that there are, and is very important. And I can tell you, I can't say much about the review panel, but I can tell you in very broad terms, this is something that again was reviewed very carefully, and plays a major part in the ranking and recommendations of the review panel. And I think that there are ways of being careful with words that are used to broaden participation without flagging your proposal
Right.
for scrutiny.
Gotcha. We actually have a question, so I'm going to read it off. Do you have any advice about how clinical research fits into the view of broader impact and engagement? For example, if the work is directed at identifying methods for improving clinical outcomes in a specific patient group, is that reasonable for counting as broader impact, or should the work also have implications for broader society out of the patient group that is being examined?
So I would say that clinical research is not really something that's appropriate to send to NSF at all. I think that you can do research that is related to understanding fundamental processes, and it's not like you can't do research on humans for NSF, but it becomes a very tenuous kind of thing. But clinical research in general is not appropriate for the Science Foundation. One of the things that's kind of interesting as the NSF has evolved, particularly through the pandemic, is that they have increasingly become interested in epidemiology and public health. And so it's interesting because it's sort of like it's right at that line of like human health. But it is different than clinical research. So there is a mechanism that was just announced with a deadline in July, and it was basically understanding human behavior in epidemiology or something like that. So they are very much looking at epidemiology and public health, but not clinical research as such.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's see here. What would you say are the key differences in the review process between NSF and NIH?
So I think the review process is, in some ways it's similar. You review the grant, you submit your reviews, and then there's a panel discussion. It used to be when I first started serving on NSF panels, they basically discussed every grant. Now they do some triage for those that are sort of lower ranking, but that's sort of discretionary, and anybody and say, I actually want to talk about this. So the process is really we review each grant, a set amount of time to review it, and then there is a um, and then there is so there's a primary reviewer, a secondary reviewer, and a scribe. And so the scribe is charged with summarizing the discussion. And then we go back and forth. And actually, this is what we're doing today in the panel that I'm on right now, is we go back and forth and make sure that everybody's in agreement, and then it gets approved. So I think that is, I mean, it's not so different, but I think that the goal is to be very constructive and to really pull all of the information together in a way that is helpful for for the for the um, for the investigators. I'm sorry, I thought of something that I was going to say, and now I can't remember what it was. That's related to this.
About
So
the
I'm trying.
review
Part of my
panel
brain is trying to remember what it was I was going to say.
about the review panels between NSF and NIH, or
Yeah, but I'll have to. Yeah, I'm sure I'll remember it.
okay, yeah, if you someone asked a question about NSF opportunities for early investigators, which, the most common one, I just put it in the link, is the
Yeah,
Early Career Award.
that's right.
Do you know much about, I don't know if you want to speak to it at all, but that's definitely,
Yeah.
it's due in June
So
or July every year. And
July.
yeah.
Yeah. So the career opportunity is sort of like the flagship sort of, or the flag, the flagship proposal for early career. Um, so this is a mechanism that really integrates both the research and educational missions of the NSF. And so these are usually 4 or 5 year long grants, and they are rigorous. They're very competitive. And if you are interested in doing an NSF proposal, there are people. There's an office up on the North Campus that actually is really
ORA.
helpful
ORA works with
in putting these reviews. The OV, sorry.
ORA, Office of Research
Yeah, ORA,
Advancement.
that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
ORA has been very helpful. We haven't had a lot out of the Jacobs School or the health sciences. They've been more out of engineering and the College of Arts and Sciences, but I actually think there's a lot of potential for people in the Jacobs School and the other health sciences schools to actually leverage that mechanism. I think again, it has to be sort of focused more on the basic biology. Um, but there are a lot of, so I'm molecular and cellular biology, but you can get, there's a range of up to organismal, so you don't have to be molecular. There's ecosystem evolution. The NSF covers basically all of biology. And I think it's a really good opportunity to craft a proposal that would meet those goals.
Mhm.
So if you're,
Yeah.
even if you're working on, I see Rebecca here. I mean, even though you're working on a clinical application, you're working on fundamental pathways that you could craft into a proposal that would be appropriate for the National Science Foundation. The other part of the career is really the mission of the educational mission and the training mission of NSF. And so this is very important. It is not necessary to develop something totally new from scratch, but I think it is important to have a substantive educational component for the career award. So this can be something like either developing or enhancing an existing K-12 program. It could be developing a course for undergraduates or graduate students that has maybe a research component or that is a little bit more innovative in terms of the pedagogy. It can be a wide range of things, but really focusing on that educational mission. And it should align to some extent with the research proposal that you are, like the research side of things. It doesn't have to be research, but it should be related to the research that you are proposing. So, I'm of the people that I know who are on this call that I can see, I can imagine of the young investigators, I can imagine many of you being able to put together a competitive career proposal. One of the things that I was told early on is that, being in a medical school, you are at a disadvantage for the National Science Foundation. And I think that may have been true at one point, but I have never seen any evidence of that on any of the review panels that I have served on and in my interactions with the program directors for my own grants. I think so. That's a misconception that sometimes some people have, and as I said, I think there's a lot of potential for that for health sciences people, as long as and you just being aware of what the priorities and the mission of the NSF are and fitting into that.
Exactly. Exactly. And as a follow-up, a question came up. Are you aware of opportunities for early career researchers to join in a review process similar to the NIH Early Career Reviewer Program?
I don't know of an early career, like an actual program for that, but I think that I think that they do have, I mean, there are a lot of early career scientists on even the review panel that I'm on, which is actually an EPSCoR panel. So these are larger grants that are from jurisdiction that are not traditionally as well funded. So New York State is not eligible for the EPSCoR panel funding, but Hawaii is, for example. But yeah, so I don't know of, and this is something I can find out, but I don't know of a program for early career scientists, but there are they do recruit early career scientists. And so if you are interested in doing that, I would suggest looking at the different program directors, the different directors within the National Science Foundation and finding mechanisms and the program directors that are responsible for them and contacting them directly. I think they're, especially now, looking for reviewers so that they can keep panels going.
Okay, let's see. So let's talk a little bit about the differences and similarities in budgeting and funding between NIH and NSF. So that would be more the budgeting process and also sort of the post-award process of budgeting. And in that, maybe also explain the difference between a grant and a cooperative agreement, which I can help with that too.
Okay, yeah, you'll have to. So I mean, I think budgeting in general is not so different. In general, there are the categories for what you can budget are similar, and just the NSF grants are smaller, typically. And the other difference is NSF grants are often 3-year grants, 3 or 4-year grants, as opposed to 4 or 5-year grants. And so that can make a difference both in terms of the scope and the budget that you're thinking about. They do not have modular budgets with NSF. What I've always been told is, request what you need to actually do the work that you're proposing to do. But you may not get what you ask for. But I do think it's important to be realistic about what you are actually asking for. One thing that NSF does that I don't believe NIH does that I've heard of anyway, is that NSF will, on occasion, choose an aim that they like and fund that. And say, we're not going to fund this entire proposal, but we will fund this aim because we think it is really strong and has potential. And then you can come back and apply for subsequent funding and that sort of thing. So while that's not as nice as getting everything that you ask for, it's nicer than not getting anything. And I actually think it's a really good, I mean, I think it's sort of indicative of the way the NSF works, where they're trying to nurture their investigators and sort of choose a part of the grant. I think really, I think is a really powerful thing, and I think can be really important for people as well in
Mhm.
moving their programs forward.
Mhm. And they also, I think there's a little bit of difference in terms of how you would set up how you would create a budget in a proposal from NSF to NIH in terms of how the indirect works, whereas with NIH, um, you would just you're just proposing direct costs, but with NSF, you have to factor in the indirect cost to the final request, if that makes sense. So if the maximum amount is $500,000, it's not $500,000 direct costs, it's $500,000 total. And
Yeah,
it's a
yeah. So if you're,
difference.
I mean, if you're doing sort of like an investigator driven kind of thing where it's sort of just a general, the standard proposal. I mean, I think the process of budgeting is very similar to NIH because you ask what you want, and then that indirects get added in. But you're right. If the PIP grant, the pandemic prevention grant that we had, was $1 million, and that was $1 million
Right.
all in. So really, it wasn't $1 million for us. It was 600,000 or something like that. Um,
Right.
Yeah, and that,
Right.
the justification is a little bit different. There are different things that are allowed. If you think you are going to have international travel, you need to put that in your budget. You can't do it after the fact, or it's more challenging to do after the fact. And yeah, there are a few little things that are also different in terms of the justifications that you have to do.
Mhm. And then how about
So you
in,
wanted to talk about cooperative agreements?
yeah, yeah. Did you want to
No,
talk
no,
about it
sorry,
or?
what were you, uh,
Just talking about the difference between those two and where a grant would be, you get a grant and I don't know if I'm giving it the exact definition of you would get a grant in order to do certain activities or certain outcomes through the federal government versus a cooperative agreement where there would be more involvement from the federal government or from whomever the sponsor is. And there may be, also pass-through entities and that sort of thing. So that's kind of the difference between the two. Um, let's see. So what about in post-award? Are there any major difference in working with sponsored projects in terms of NSF versus NIH?
Not really. I mean, it's
Mhm.
it's it's very similar. Again, there are some things that are not allowed, or there are small things that are different. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but overall, it's very similar. Oh, the one thing about NSF budgeting is that there is a limit to the effort that you can request for NSF, which is 2 calendar months,
Mhm.
and that is across all awards. So that actually is a significant difference from NIH. So
Mhm.
it was really sort of limits the amount of salary recovery that is available. So that ends being about just under 20% of 20% effort. And as I said, that's across all NSF awards. So if you have more than one, you have to balance your effort between up to 2 calendar months between the two or more awards that you are dealing with.
Mhm. Do you have any suggestions about working with program directors at NSF?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, this is probably not any different really than what you would do with NIH if you can. I think the program directors building that relationship, and I think that it is really important and beneficial. I think starting off reviewing, it can be, as a reviewer, can be a really good way to begin that connection. But also, just in terms of developing your grant and making sure, especially if this is the first time you're applying for staff, getting in touch with program directors and making sure that the way, not only is the area, the topic that you want to do appropriate, is the approach that you're going to take, is it going to raise any red flags? I sent this was a while ago now. I sent a sort of a one pager to one of the program directors for MCB, and I was like, is this sort of specific aims page, does this work? Would this be appropriate for NSF? And, she responded, it was very constructive. And I mean, she basically said, yes, this is fine, but take all of this. I had accidentally left in a couple of references to cancer. And she was like, this is fine, but take this out.
Mhm.
And so I think they can be really responsive and they can be really helpful. And they do advocate. So the program directors my impression is that the program directors at NSF have a little bit more flexibility in terms of prioritizing things, in terms of carving out aims, as I just already mentioned. Um, and so I think having that connection with them is especially
Mhm.
important and
Do you
beneficial, as I
think
said.
Do you think that so you didn't have luck when you first started applying to NSF, and then you received the first grant under the special initiative for COVID, and then you received the second one a couple years ago. Do you think that um was it because you had developed a relationship with NSF and had success that you were then able to, or do you think it just was luck that you had these two opportunities that were funded? I mean, I'm just curious if you think that having a relationship with NSF helped.
I definitely think that having that connection with the program director over time made a big difference in getting the the mismatch repair grant funded,
Hmm.
because it had been a little while, but I had put in some applications previously. I had served on review panels, and so and I got feedback, and that process was really, really
Hmm. Hmm.
beneficial. For the pandemic prevention grant, that was a multi-directorate um, award, and so there were program directors involved from the computer science directorate, from the engineering directorate, from the biological directorate, and from the social behavioral and economic social behavioral and economics health directorate. And so that was an interesting thing. One of the reasons that we were successful in getting that one was because we had a very broad range of faculty um, that came together, that had a track record of working together already, and that was very open and responsive to the idea of this cross-disciplinary work. So one thing that I have, and I mean, I don't know, it seems to me that NSF is putting out more of these calls for these larger convergent
Hmm.
grants
Yeah.
as well. I don't know if that's going to continue, because who knows with funding, but certainly over the last few years, that has been more of a priority of bringing different investigators together to try to address bigger questions. And so I actually have signed up for newsletters from a number of different directorates. So from the biology, but also from math, from engineering, from computer science, because
Mhm.
a lot of a lot of it is not going to be relevant for you, but when they have these bigger awards or bigger uh, opportunities that involve multiple directorates, then you see them and see them more frequently. So,
Right, right. We actually have a question which I can also take if we can see for the career award. When do you recommend assistant PIs apply? What are your recommendations for building up the broader impact component in terms of becoming involved in various outreach programs before applying? Oh, I'm not
involvement
sure.
in
Oh, you were frozen for a second. Sorry. So
interrupt you.
can you repeat that? You were frozen for most of that. Okay. I can maybe answer that question. I would also advise any new career faculty to reach out to ORA because they do a whole series
Sorry about
on
that.
career awards. Oh, you're back?
Yeah.
Okay, so can you repeat your answer and to the career?
Yeah. So I think it's important to have some track record in the broader impacts, but you don't necessarily have had to establish the program or the initiative that you are proposing. I think you have to have some credibility that this is something that you have some sort of basis in or some sort of um, familiarity with. You've made the connections, you've got the partnerships in place to actually do it. You have the training or the know-how. If you are proposing to do some implementing some new pedagogical processes, that you have the knowledge to do it and the wherewithal to do it. But I don't think you necessarily have had to establish it, because it is a bit of a heavy lift if to do that, while also establishing a research program. I mean, I love the idea of the career award in terms of really emphasizing the integration of research and education, because to me, I think that integration is critical. But I do question it being an early career. If it were my preference, I think that should be a slightly later career kind of thing, just because it's a lot to develop the broader impacts and that educational mission at the same time as your research program. Um, so I would suggest doing it not in your first year, but maybe, and I mean, you can tell me if you think this is totally wrong, Karen, but I think third year is probably at the sweet spot where you have things up and running, where you've made some connections, because oftentimes you're new to the area when you are an assistant professor. So it takes time to scope out the landscape, figure out what people are doing, who are good partners, and that sort of thing. But really, if this is something that people are going to do, I would strongly encourage you to leverage existing resources. And this is true of broader impacts more broadly, for NSF proposals. So, in the Jacob School, we have outreach. We have
Mhm.
K to 12 STEM outreach, we have community outreach, we have educational initiatives. Find out what those are, get involved in that to build up those connections and partnerships. Other schools have similar kinds of things. And, there's UBWise, which is the Women in Science and Engineering. There are these organizations that exist. You don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. and I know, I'm involved in a lot of the STEM outreach stuff here in the Jacobs School. And our goal is to provide a platform for people to do their own thing, to sort of not have to start from scratch, to have the connections, but then if you want to do something different, build off that, then you have the opportunity to do that. So I would strongly encourage people to leverage what we're already doing in the school. And for those of you who are not in the Jacobs School, I'm happy to share with you our STEM ambassador team. Sign up if you want to be involved in that, to try to bolster that and build connections within this sort of STEM outreach landscape in Buffalo and UB.
We have another early career question. Let me see here. So does NSF have any type of ESI status equivalent for grant applications, or just specific early career awards? I'm not sure what ESI status is.
I don't know. So it's like early stage investigator. So
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I
I don't
yeah, I don't know that they do.
think that they do.
Yeah, I don't believe that they do. I will say that they're, certainly career stage is taken into consideration and is part of the conversation within the review process itself. So somebody who is an early career or early stage investigator, the expectations in terms of what is in the grant, what you've already done, what you've accomplished, is going to be tailored to where you are in your career.
Right. Yeah.
At least that's my experience on review panel.
Yeah, and my recollection is that the only real early career mechanism for NSF is the Early Career Award. There is something in their computer science directorate. The name is escaping me, but it's computer science very specific. So so it's like actually below a early career. But those are the only two that I'm aware of. So do we have any other questions? We can talk about the Science and Technology Center program if you want to touch on that at all, or ask Jill to explain. I'm sorry.
I can probably pitch that for a second if Dr.
Sure.
Surtees is okay with it.
Of course.
So my experiences with NSF are more centered in their major grants areas. And to the point that when we were first joining the call today, Dr. Surtees and I were talking about the fact that I'm chairing a site review for one of their science and technology centers in Arizona for the second year in a couple of weeks. What I would just say from the vantage that I have, NSF probably recognized very early on the potential with team science, and they invested into it quite heavily. And so what used to be a $50 million award for a center that I used to be the managing director for, now they've actually increased those awards to $60 million over a 10-year period for a couple of reasons. First of all, they recognize that to get teams to work together, it's costly, but the potential outcomes can be game-changing and significant. And they also recognize that when you're bringing research teams together in a space and from an interdisciplinary perspective, it takes time to form and it takes time to get things to gel. Everybody has the best of intentions and great ideas, but you need to get groups to translate from one discipline to another and to be able to work together and then really get on a roll with performing. So that's why they award things like the NSF Science and Technology Centers or the NSF engines that many of you may have heard of that campus just put forth actually this week, for a longer period of time. And I would just encourage people, if that is something that is of interest to you, if you have something, if you have a collaborative group and you're interested in pursuing something within your areas, and the one thing that's really beautiful about what NSF has done in this regard is that they recognize that you need administrative support and that you need people who are dedicated to broader impacts, whether it be knowledge transfer with industry or other elements. And they're willing to invest in that. And so they don't expect that everything is going to just be on the back of a principal investigator to lead. And so I would just say, you know, if it's something that is of interest to you, they're highly competitive, but we've secured one for the University at Buffalo in 2013. We were one of 3 institutions that were awarded a Science and Technology Center, and the other 2 being Harvard and MIT in that year. So, you know, think about the individual investigator awards, but also think about the big picture things that they have to offer, because I really do think that they do foster an environment, and they back it up with the funding to support team science and really impactful groups. So Dr. Surtees, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add one thing is like the other thing so that our pandemic prevention grant is one of these is an example of this sort of nurturing team science, nurturing convergent research and bringing these disciplines together. And it's sort of there are also, and this the epidemiology grant that I mentioned earlier, and more of these grants coming out they are convergent research. So they're not the individual investigator, but they're not quite at this large center grant either. And so they're in the $4 to $6 million range, which I think is another area to be thinking about. And I think that having a diversity of, you know, early and mid and late career investigators as I shouldn't say late, more senior investigators as part of those interdisciplinary and sort of team science it is actually a consideration of, you know, it's one of the things that is looked at in the review that you're, you know, supporting and focusing on development of early career faculty. And so I think that that's another opportunity, which is a little bit different than the individual investigator grant, but I think is a really exciting opportunity to get involved in as an early career scientist or as a you know, mid or more senior scientist. And then those all have, in addition to the intellectual merit and broader impacts, which are always a component of NSF review, they also will have solicitation specific requirements that you know, deal with integration and how the collaborations are going to work and developing research capacity, you know, broadening participation in the workforce, that sort of thing.
Right. Does anyone have any other questions? If you want to unmute or add in the chat. No? Going once.
I just want to say, Dr. Surtees, thank you for taking the time to do this. I know that Karen is going to close, but so many times I think investigators, they follow a path because it's what everybody else around them is doing. And it seems more comfortable and there's a broader knowledge base, and you've obviously done things outside of the box in many ways, which is why it was great for people to hear you today, because you've pursued something that typically wasn't resonating 10 years ago in a medical school. And I cheer you on for that. So.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate it. And happy to, if anybody, I mean, I'm happy to follow up with anybody if anybody is interested. Somebody did ask me about whether or not this was being recorded, because they couldn't be here. I don't know if there's, yeah. So I can let them know that it was recorded. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure the process, Jill. They're on the YouTube, they'll be on our YouTube page, is that correct?
The UB Health Sciences have a YouTube channel. Thanks to Dr. Deep. But you can't see, like, she's too backlit. We can't even see her face right now, but yeah, we have a YouTube channel that all of these are posted to.
Yes, so we can let you know.
Makes us sound very young and hip.
I just we have an undergraduate that is more savvy with technology and will sort of trim it and make it nice and neat, and then we post it on the YouTube channel, which I'm going to put a plug here for the new Health Sciences website that will be coming out soon. That there will be an easy link to it, but easy, you just Google Health Science on YouTube, and please subscribe. I don't know. That's what you're supposed to say when you have YouTube.
Okay, well,
It's good to know that they're there. I did not know that. So yeah.
Yes, I know. I just realized it myself not too long ago. Well, thank you again so much for your time, and we really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us.